Have you ever really stopped to think about how our brains pull off the magic trick of learning a new language? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down the core principles of how it all works, pulling directly from the incredible insights in the book Second Language Acquisition Applied to English Language Teaching. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to define what second language acquisition, or SLA, actually is. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the learning engine, the three key parts that make it go. After that, we'll look at the human side of things, how our feelings and psychology play a huge role. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by seeing how this theory applies in a real-world classroom. Okay, first things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page with a clear, basic understanding of what we're even talking about here. So here's the most important thing to get right off the bat. SLA is not just about learning in a classroom. Nope. It covers the entire process of learning any language after your first one. It doesn't matter if you're picking it up traveling the world or if you're hitting the books and studying grammar rules. It's all part of the same fascinating field. Now, let's get into the mechanics. I want you to think about language learning like it's this high-performance engine. And this engine has three absolutely essential parts that all have to work together. The first part of our engine is input. This is the fuel. It's all the language a learner hears, all the language they read. But here's the catch. Not just any input works. For it to actually spark learning, it has to be understandable, but also just a little bit of a stretch. The linguist Stephen Krashen had a great name for this, I+1. It's that sweet spot right beyond what you already know. Kind of like a video game level that's challenging, but, not impossible. But of course, an engine needs more than just fuel to go somewhere, right? Learners have to actually produce the language themselves. That's output. And there's this really cool idea called pushed output. This is when you're in a situation where you have to try and say or write something that's a bit more complex or accurate than what you're comfortable with. It forces you to level up your skills. And that brings us to the third and maybe the most critical part of the engine, interaction. This is where input and output smash together and create magic. When we talk to people, we're constantly asking things like, wait, what do you mean? Or, can you say that again? This whole process, this negotiation for meaning, turns a regular old conversation into an incredibly powerful learning experience. So you can see how this all locks together into this amazing self-reinforcing cycle. You get some input that you can mostly understand, you're pushed to produce your own output, then you interact with someone to make sure you're both on the same page. And guess what? That very interaction becomes brand new, perfectly tailored input for everyone in the conversation. It's just a beautiful learning loop. But learning isn't just some mechanical process. It's messy and it's human. Our own psychology, our emotions, they play a massive role in all of this. Let's just bust a huge myth right now, the idea that you're too old to learn a new language. The research is pretty clear that this is, it's just not true. Sure, little kids might have an easier time picking up a perfect accent, but adults, we bring some serious cognitive firepower to the table. Our developed brains make us fantastic learners, especially in a classroom where we can really dig into the rules and structure. Okay, let's talk about anxiety. It can be a total learning killer. That really high, debilitating anxiety, it puts up what researchers call an affective filter. It's like a wall that literally blocks your brain from taking in new information. But not all anxiety is bad. A little bit of what's called facilitative anxiety, that slight nervous energy before you have to give a presentation, that can actually help. It creates a kind of cognitive tension that keeps you sharp and focused. This next point is so important. You have to understand that not all wrong answers are the same. A mistake is just a slip-up. You know the right way to say it, you just messed up in the moment. An error, though, is different. An error shows there's a real gap in your knowledge. For a teacher, or even for yourself, knowing that difference is huge. It tells you what needs a quick fix versus what needs to be learned from scratch. In fact, the best teachers totally reframe this whole idea. Instead of marking something wrong, they'll say something like, "Great mistake." I mean, how cool is that? That simple phrase changes everything. It shows that making errors isn't something to be ashamed of. It's a valued, visible sign that you're trying, that you're learning. It points right to the spot where you have an opportunity to grow. So, we've got the engine, we've got the human element. What does this all mean in the real world? How do we take this theory and use it to actually teach and learn a language? Well, it turns out the best materials and the best classes are built on these exact principles. They give you tons of rich, meaningful input that you see again and again. They get you invested, both emotionally and intellectually. They help you notice the grammar, the form of the language, but without ever losing track of the meaning. And most importantly, they give you tons and tons of chances to actually use the language to communicate with other people. And all of this brings us to one last big question to chew on. If we really believe that learning is a messy, ongoing process and not just a final performance to be graded, well, how does that change the way we teach and the way we learn? It reframes everything, doesn't it? It changes our goals, our methods, and what we even consider to be success. It's something to think about for both the teacher and the student.